All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are talking about an organism that all of us in a microbiology lab have seen, but maybe haven't given its due respect. We are going to unmask a true master impersonator, Streptococcus Dysgalactiae subspecies equisimilis.
Think about it. This is a bacterium that perfectly mimics one of the most notorious killers we deal with. And for years, it's been hiding in plain sight in our labs, probably sitting in your LIS data right now, often mislabeled or just overlooked. So everything we're about to go through comes from a deep dive using a Gemini deep search analysis. And for those of you who really want to geek out on the primary literature, don't worry, the full notebook document with every single source is available for you to check out.
Okay, here's our game plan. First, we'll unmask this pathogen and look at its history. Then we'll cover the clinical side of things. After that, a masterclass on lab ID, the really fun part. Then we'll get into treatment and susceptibilities. And finally, we'll wrap up with prevention and a look to the future.
So, let's start at the beginning. How did we even get here? Well, for the longest time, this organism was just Group C strep or Group G strep, right? It was often just dismissed as background noise, a simple commensal.
This timeline really tells the story of its coming out party. Before '96, it was basically anonymous. Then, that landmark paper by Van Damme et al. Finally gave it a proper name, splitting the human pathogen equisimilis from its animal cousin. And since then, thanks to game-changing tech like MALDI-TOF, we've started unmasking just how common it is. And the grand finale? In 2025, it's getting its own specific entry in the EUCAST tables. That is a massive deal, officially cementing its status as a major league pathogen. Okay, so we know its backstory. But what does it actually do to people? Well, this is where that impersonator title really comes into play. Clinically, it is a dead ringer for Streptococcus pyogenes.
Just look at this list. It's incredible. It causes everything from a sore throat you literally cannot distinguish from strep throat at the bedside, all the way to the absolute worst-case scenarios, necrotizing fasciitis, toxic shock syndrome, and it can even trigger the same post-infectious problems like glomerulonephritis and rheumatic fever. This isn't just a coincidence. It's because it has acquired the exact same genetic tools, the same virulence factors that make its famous cousin so dangerous.
So who's most at risk? Well, this is an opportunist through and through. It loves to target vulnerable people, the elderly, patients with diabetes or cancer, and anyone with chronic skin conditions that give it an easy way in. As our population gets older, this bug is finding more and more targets. It's a classic opportunistic pathogen for our time.
All right, let's get to the fun stuff. This next section is for all of us at the bench. How do we actually catch this impersonator and make the right call every time?
So you've got a plate. The initial clues look pretty standard. Gram stain, classic strep. On the blood agar, you're seeing those nice, large colonies with big zones of beta hemolysis. Great. But here comes the trap, the Lancefield grouping. Sure, most are group C or G, but sometimes it'll type as a group A. And if you stop there, you're going to call it Streptococcus pyogenes. That's the pitfall we have to avoid. So that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? You've got that big beta hemolytic strep on your plate. How do you make that final definitive call and separate it from its lookalikes?
And thankfully, the answer is in some good old-fashioned reliable biochem. It really boils down to this table. Your absolute best friend is the PYR test. Streptococcus Dysgalactiae subspecies equisimilis is PYR negative, period. That cleanly separates it from Streptococcus pyogenes, which is always positive. At the same time, it's Voges-Proskauer negative, which sorts it out from the VP positive members of the anginosus group. Those two tests are your workhorses.
Of course, these days, we've got an even bigger toolbox. I mean, MALDI-TOF has been an absolute game changer, hasn't it? It gives us a fast, cheap, and accurate ID right down to the species level. If things get weird, 16S sequencing is still the gold standard. And when you get into public health and epidemiology, tools like M-typing and especially whole genome sequencing give us this incredible high-resolution view to track outbreaks and see how clones are spreading.
Okay, so we found it, we've identified it correctly. Now, how do we guide the clinicians to treat it effectively?
Let's start with the single most important piece of information, and it's fantastic news. This bug remains universally susceptible to penicillin. I mean, zero documented clinical resistance to date. So penicillin is, without a doubt, the drug of choice. But, and this is a big but, resistance to alternatives like macrolides and clindamycin is pretty common. So you absolutely have to run your AST if a beta-lactam can't be used.
Now here's where it gets interesting. How different places approach treatment. For a simple pharyngitis, you see two different philosophies. The Dutch guidelines are very conservative. Use antibiotics only when you really have to, and just for 7 days. Compare that to international guidelines, which often recommend a longer 10-day course. Why? The goal there is to completely eradicate the bug to prevent those rare but devastating post-infectious sequelae.
Now, for the really scary stuff like necrotizing fasciitis, you have to hit it hard. That means high-dose IV penicillin plus clindamycin. The reason for that combo is critical. The clindamycin is there to shut down the bacteria's toxin factories, which is absolutely vital for saving life and limb. For kids, it's pretty straightforward. We just borrow the well-established protocols for Streptococcus pyogenes and adjust for weight.
And this right here, this is proof that the world is finally catching up. This official announcement from EUCAST is a landmark moment. It's this organism finally getting the recognition it deserves as a major pathogen, one that we need to track and interpret in a standardized way all across the world.
So until those 2025 tables arrive, this is what we're working with. The generic breakpoints for strep groups C and G. You can see that penicillin breakpoint is super low, which confirms what we already know. But look over at erythromycin and clindamycin. The breakpoints are also very low, and this is exactly why you have to do susceptibility testing. You just can't assume they'll work.
Okay, let's bring it all home with our last section. How do we stop this thing from spreading, and what does the future look like for this impersonator? Well, the good news for infection control is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The logic is simple. It spreads just like Streptococcus pyogenes, so we fight it just like Streptococcus pyogenes. That means standard, droplet, and contact precautions when appropriate, with good hand hygiene as the absolute foundation of everything. And of course, common sense rules apply for healthcare workers. Stay home until you're no longer contagious.
So I want to leave you with this one final provocative question. We have a bug that's genetically flexible, it's great at stealing weapons from other bacteria, and its favorite targets, the elderly and chronically ill, are a bigger part of our population every year. So, are we watching the rise of the next dominant pyogenic Streptococcus? It's something to think about.
And that's a wrap on Streptococcus Dysgalactiae subspecies equisimilis. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. You all are the experts out there on the front lines, so we genuinely want to see your expert feedback and experiences in the comments below. And hey, if you found this useful, please subscribe to the channel for more.